Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. The world's two largest economies, America and China, have called a fragile truce in their high-stakes tariff war. Following a surprise agreement in Geneva, both sides agreed to drastically lower mutual tariffs for 90 days, buying time for further negotiations. But the clock is already ticking, and the global market isn't waiting. Shipping rates have spiked, businesses are rushing deliveries, and countries like South Korea are caught in a new diplomatic and economic balancing act. At the APEC meetings in Jeju, those tensions spilled into open, with China sharply criticizing U.S. Trade policy and calling for an extension of the truce. All these developments come as South Korea is working to navigate the shifting power dynamics and prepare for July's critical bilateral package talks with Washington. To help us break into these updates at this year's APEC, we are joined in the studio by Min Jung-hoon, professor at Korean National Diplomatic Academy. Welcome.
My pleasure.
And also joining us online is Jeff Moon, president of China Moon Strategies LLC and former assistant U.S. Trade Representative for China. Great to see you.
Thank you.
So let's start with Mr. Moon. With the Geneva Agreement now in effect and U.S. China tariffs temporarily lowered, U.S. importers are rushing to front-load shipments and markets are reacting sharply. Do you think we're already seeing signs that the truce is shifting some trade patterns? And also tell us what kind of risks loom as the 90-day deadline approaches?
President Trump's decision at Geneva to lower American tariffs on Chinese goods from 145% to about 30% has removed the effective tariff embargo, suddenly allowed goods to flow again, and is the cause of the front-loading that you described. You're right, however, that tariffs are affecting not just short-term market behavior, but also long-term trading patterns. Export manufacturers in China are gradually moving production to other countries because they see the deteriorating U.S.-China relationship is unlikely to improve anytime soon. Some Chinese companies are also shifting production to third countries to both ease overcapacity and to avoid American tariffs. American officials are lobbying counterparts in Korea and elsewhere to crack down on Chinese transshipment, and I expect we're going to hear a lot more about that issue in the months to come. Transshipment is an emerging issue, and I think it will become increasingly prominent this year in the U.S. China agenda and in the U.S. relationship with other countries as well.
Right. So even though we're in the initial phases of the 90-day deadline, the shift in trade patterns seems to be already evident. Now, building on that, just days after the Geneva deal, Professor Min, China used the forum to sharply criticize U.S. Unilateral tariffs. Do you think how should we interpret China's strategy here?
Personally, I think that China is trying to take the spot the U.S. left and establish itself as a new leader of the free and multilateral trading system when it responded to Trump government's America First trade policy. So it means that China is trying to take over what U.S. used to take in the global market system. As you know, U.S. had been the leader of the free trade system for over 50 years before President Trump took the White House. So it is also true that U.S. achieved economic growth and prosperity under the global economic system, but in the past decades, U.S. realized that the system did not work for the country anymore, as it lost its manufacturing force capabilities and competitiveness. So Trump government wants to bring factories and facilities back to the U.S. soil and restore its manufacturing industries by using tariffs aggressively. So what Trump government is doing in the trade sector is making other countries confused, and U.S. is like giving up its position as the leader of the free market system. And China is moving actively to take over the spot and is trying to enhance its standing as alternative leader of the global economic community. However, it's not clear whether and how other countries would accept China as a new leader of the system because they got a little bit sour experience with China in the past. For example, European countries perceived that they needed to maintain their trade relations with China based on their economic benefits, but they are not eager to improving their cooperation with China seriously due to the lack of their trust or credibility on China. In addition, they are also worried the possibility that if the U.S. China relations got worse, then the European market would be affected by the Chinese cheap items.
So though China is definitely having a strong push, we'll have to see how much it gains trust and credibility from other countries. Now, in parallel to this diplomatic signaling, we saw a dramatic spike in freight costs and rapid logistical shifts. Mr. Moon, how do you interpret this sudden market reaction? Do you think it's a sign of underlying instability or just a practical rush to, beat the deadline?
I see much of this as a logical response by the business community to constantly changing market conditions. Logistical costs are increasing and conditions on the ground are changing in response to the unpredictable Trump policies that shape market opportunities. On the one hand, it's disturbing that President Trump's tariffs have created so much uncertainty that businessmen have no choice but to react on a day-to-day basis to his policy changes, as well as the inevitable Chinese retaliation. But on the other hand, the business community's ability to react quickly and to adapt reflects resilience. That's admirable. I think it's that resilience that explains why bilateral U.S. China trade exceeding $500 billion a year continues despite the many stresses that we continue to see in the market.
Right, so the spike definitely shows both logistical urgency and also highlights market uncertainty as well. Now, as we're seeing Beijing attempt to shape the narrative further, China's state media has recently publicly called for an extension to this 90-day truce, saying the time is kind of too short. Professor Min, what do you make of this move? Do you think it's an early negotiation tactic to go through the 90 days, or a sign that Beijing is already trying to, shift the rules?
Basically, I think that China seems to have some confidence in terms of the making negotiations with the United States, and I think it also shows the Chinese intention that it would fully take advantage of the negotiation and tries to secure enough time before reaching a satisfying agreement for China. But as you know, when President Trump imposed the tariffs to all countries, China, unlike all the other countries, only China resisted strongly from the beginning. Specifically, when the U.S. imposed the tariffs, China also imposed the retaliatory tariffs and took other non-tariff countermeasures. And as China resisted, and the tariffs imposed by President Trump hit the American economy hard, domestic discontent and concerns emerged in the country, and then President Trump took measures to postpone the tariffs for 90 days. And he then moved forward and wanted to talk to China. And China domestically promoted the negotiation with the United States as a victory. And China showed its strong intention. It would not give in to the United States in the tariff war. And through the strong posture, China tries to improve China's standing internationally. And as a matter of fact, I think that China is fully aware of what President Trump wants from the tariff negotiation. Specifically, China knows that President Trump could be satisfied if China increases imports of American products like the agricultural products and energy, and reduce the trade surplus on U.S. But China also wants to gain political and diplomatic advantages by showing that it's a very tough very tough counterpart during the negotiation process. So overall, I think China is trying to fully take advantage of the situation on behalf of the Chinese own strategic interests.
So it seems like a classic move by Beijing to maintain leverage. Now, so in line with this 90-day extension scheme, recent market surveys suggest many global investors now expect the U.S. China tariff rate to settle at 30% within 6 months. Mr. Moon, how credible do you think this projection is? And what long-term economic adjustments do you think should South Korean industries be preparing for?
Well, President Trump lowered the U.S. tariff rate from 145% because that tariff level imposed a de facto trade embargo. Many people in Washington think that trade becomes impossible once tariff rates hit 60%. 30% is well below that level, but I'm not confident that tariff rates are going to settle there because I think that the prohibitive tariff rate varies from sector to sector and product to product. I saw a press report, for example, about how artificial Christmas trees from China sent to the U.S. ceased to be profitable at the 20% tariff level. And 95% of artificial Christmas trees in the U.S. come from China. So either the U.S. government will have to lower that tariff rate for those products to 20% or lower, or American consumers will not have Christmas trees in December. So the bottom line here is that the 30% level may be acceptable in some sectors and allow business to go forward, but that full two-way trade is going to be impossible without greater tariff flexibility.
Right. So it could force major industrial adjustments depending on each sector. Let's also touch upon South Korea's role now. Professor Min, as the APEC chair, South Korea played a key role in moderating tensions and securing a joint statement despite opposing views from U.S. and China. What does this achievement say about Korea's position and diplomacy in terms of Indo-Pacific trade architecture?
Well, the title of APEC 2025 Korea this year is Building a Sustainable Tomorrow, Connect, Innovative, and Prosper. And during the meetings, the APEC trade ministers expressed the concerns of fundamental changes, the challenges facing the global trading environment, and they agreed about the importance of the World Trade Organization, WTO. And in the joint statement, the 21 APEC member economies pledged to help the restoration of the multilateral trading system centered on the WTO and cooperate in responding to uncertainty in global trade conditions. But it was also reported that it would not be easy to secure the joint statement, mainly because of the point of view that the Trump government has on the global trading system. As you know, Trump government prefers to have bilateral negotiations over the multilateral cooperation, and it's not satisfied with what WTO has done for the global trading system. So it was expected that the U.S. would not agree with a joint statement, like the APEC members would work together to restore the multilateral trading system centered on WTO. And as the chair this year, South Korea, I think, played a key role in moderating tensions and securing the joint statement. In fact, as an open trade country, South Korea itself needs an international trade order based on the universal norms, values, and principles. So it tried to persuade all the member countries, including the United States, and couldn't make them agree to the last minute. So again, most of all, the fact that the Trump government, the United States, agreed to the joint statement, I think is important and could contribute to reducing the uncertainty of the global trading system.
Right, so it seems Korea's role would be pivotal in balancing U.S.-China tensions. Now, on the surface, the APEC joint statement reaffirmed multilateralism and WTO reform as well, but many countries still are skeptical about this. Mr. Moon, do you think this kind of rhetoric still carries some economic weight, or is it largely symbolic?
I've participated in APEC in years past, both as a U.S. official and as an American businessman. And in my experience, I can't recall the joint statement ever having any practical impact. And the reason is that APEC plays an important role because it brings together countries on both sides of the Pacific Ocean to discuss issues and programs where consensus is possible. It's a useful venue for sharing ideas and especially best practices that country representatives can take back and implement in their countries. Because APEC is a consensus organization, it tends to avoid controversial issues like the current trade wars. Those issues, quite frankly, are best left to other venues. So to answer your question directly, I think it's fine for APEC to state general goals for the future, but I see statements about contentious trade issues as really inconsistent with the purpose and the spirit of the organization.
Right. So the multilateral rhetoric still seems to struggle to translate into concrete action, and that will be a challenge moving forward. Now, Mr. Moon, let's look a deep closer at South Korea's bilateral front. South Korea-U.S. high-level meeting was held on May 16th, the second since the April 2+2 talks, and this marked a critical checkpoint. There are industry-specific issues like shipbuilding and semiconductors reportedly came up. How likely do you think is it that South Korea can extract tariff relief on these sectors by offering some better cooperation?
American and Korean negotiators are currently aiming to complete a new trade agreement by July. We really have only limited information about those discussions, but the U.S. has indicated it expects that the current 10% reciprocal tariffs will probably remain in effect for all countries. My guess is that the reciprocal tariffs for Korea will not rise above that 10% level. The U.S. also wants to discuss non-tariff barriers, such as regulations on autos, rice, and beef imports, as well as currency policy. Meanwhile, Korea has raised concerns about sectoral tariffs, especially with regard to autos and steel. The recent U.S.-UK agreement relaxed some sectoral tariffs, so that may give some hope to Korean negotiators. In any event, however, I expect that the two countries will announce a big package that will cover a wide variety of issues, including the semiconductor and shipbuilding cooperation that you mentioned.
Then staying with this, Professor Min, how would you assess the broader effect of this U.S. China deal on Washington's tone or strategy in terms of talks with South Korea?
Personally, I think that the U.S. China deal could make a positive impact on the negotiations between South Korea and U.S. Currently, I think U.S. is in a situation where it should finish the negotiations with many countries and achieve satisfying outcomes during the 90-day tariff deferral. In particular, the negative public opinion on tariffs in the United States pushed, I think, Trump government to quickly come up with negotiation results. And among them, the negotiation with China received the most attention, but it was expected that it could take long and not easy due to Chinese strong resistance. So in order to achieve quick results, Trump government designated the 5 friendly countries, including the United Kingdom, India, Japan, Australia, and South Korea, as priority negotiation countries and tried to move forward as quickly as possible. Fortunately, the negotiation with the United Kingdom, which was considered a relatively easy negotiation, was concluded quickly, but other countries, including Japan and India, wanted to take more time and negotiate carefully based on Chinese responses. The reaction was a good example for other countries. And as the negotiations did not move forward as expected, Trump government became impatient, and this situation, I think, seemed to affect its more flexible attitude in negotiations with China. And as negotiations with China began and both U.S. and China agreed to lower tariffs more than expected, U.S. economy could reduce uncertainty to some degree, and Trump government felt somewhat relieved. So the progress in the negotiation with China would reduce American burden, Trump's government burden, to conclude the negotiations with China, with South Korea quickly, and will allow U.S. to show more flexible stance in lowering tariffs imposed on its ally, South Korea. So I think that the South Korea needed to watch the progress of negotiations with other major countries like China and Japan, and prepare sufficiently for the tariff deal with the U.S. without rushing to the finish line.
So it did actually create a window of flexibility, and we will have to have better negotiations moving forward with the next administration as well. But as for now, we will have to conclude our discussion at this point. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights tonight, Mr. Moon.
Thank you.
And Professor Min.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.